"Make it quick, cowboy, I won't scream," said the wounded Apache girl who was stuck under the canyon. The sun was just beginning to rise over the horizon, painting the canyon walls in shades of gold and orange. Ahioka, a young Apache girl of barely 16, had been awake since dawn. The crisp morning air filled her lungs as she carefully made her way along the rocky cliffs near her village. She loved these early hours when the world was quiet, and the only sounds were the soft whisper of the wind and the occasional call of a distant bird. It was during moments like these that she felt free, as if the wide canyon belonged only to her. Ahioka's feet moved quickly but carefully over the uneven rocks. She had grown up near the canyon, exploring its hidden trails and secret caves, but each day brought new challenges. The rocks shifted under her weight, and she kept her balance with careful steps, her small hands brushing against the rough stone to steady herself. Her heart beat faster with excitement as she imagined reaching a small ledge she had discovered the week before, a place where the river below glittered like silver in the morning light. She wanted to see it again before the sun climbed higher in the sky. As she climbed higher, she felt a thrill of independence. This canyon was her playground, and she knew its secrets better than anyone else in her village. She had learned from her elders how to read the land, how to know which rocks were safe to step on and which were loose, ready to slide away under a careless foot. But even with all her experience, she was still young, and young people often believed they were stronger and braver than they truly were. Without warning, the rock beneath her foot shifted. It wobbled dangerously, sending a shiver of fear up her spine. She tried to step back, but it was too late. Her foot slipped on the loose gravel and she tumbled down a short slope. She landed hard against the canyon wall, pain shooting through her ankle. She gasped and pressed her hands to the ground, trying to stop herself from sliding further. Her heart pounded as she realized she had fallen into a narrow crevice, a gap between two large rocks that left her trapped. The crevice was tight. She tried to push herself up, but her ankles screamed in pain with every movement. She looked around, searching for a way to climb out, but the rocks above her were too high, and the walls of the canyon pressed close on either side. She was stuck. A wave of panic rose in her chest, but she forced herself to breathe deeply. Her elders had taught her many things about survival, and she remembered their lessons now. Stay calm, conserve your energy, and think clearly. She tried calling out, hoping someone from the village might hear her. "Hello! Please! Help!" Her voice echoed faintly against the canyon walls, but the sound was swallowed by the vast emptiness. The canyon was far from the village, and the rocky walls acted like a barrier, muting her cries. She realized that no one would hear her, unless she could find a way to get attention, or wait until someone passed by. The thought of being alone in the canyon frightened her, but she pushed the fear aside. She had faced challenges before, and she would face this one too. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and the heat began to bake the canyon rocks. Ahioka's throat was dry, and her mouth felt parched. She tried to stay calm, sipping small amounts of water she had in a leather pouch, rationing it carefully. She shifted her position slightly, careful not to worsen her ankle, and looked around the crevice. The shadows of the canyon moved slowly as the sun rose, changing the shapes of the rocks around her. Even in her fear, she noticed the beauty of the canyon, the way the sunlight hit the cliffs, the way the river sparkled below. It reminded her that the world was bigger than any problem, even one as frightening as being trapped. As the day went on, Ahioka thought about her family. Her parents, her younger brother, and the elders in the village. How worried they would be when they discovered she was missing. The thought made her anxious, but it also gave her strength. She could not give up. She had to survive, to find a way to get out, or to signal for help. She remembered the stories of brave people from her tribe, people who had faced danger and hardship but had found a way through. If they could survive, so could she. Ahioka tried to make herself comfortable as best as she could. She leaned against the rock wall, supporting her injured ankle, and took deep, measured breaths. She sang softly to herself a quiet song her mother had taught her. The song was meant to calm the heart, and it worked. Her fear began to fade slightly, replaced by a quiet determination. She thought about what she could do to get out. Perhaps she could use the small rocks around her to wedge a foothold, or maybe she could find a branch from a nearby shrub to help lift herself.
She examined every possibility carefully, refusing to act recklessly.
The hours stretched on, and the sun began to lower toward the horizon. Ahioka's body ached from being in the same position, and her stomach growled from hunger. She had only brought a small piece of bread with her, which she ate slowly, savoring each bite. She thought about how she had taken her freedom for granted that morning, wandering without fear, and how quickly things could change. The canyon that had seemed like a place of adventure now felt like a trap. But even so, she refused to let despair take over. She whispered words of encouragement to herself, reminding herself of her courage and resourcefulness. As evening approached, the canyon cooled, and the shadows grew longer. Ahioka knew that night would be more dangerous. The temperature would drop, and she would have to find a way to stay warm. She wrapped herself in a small blanket she had carried, pressing it close to her body. She tried to stay awake, alert to any sounds of nearby animals or people. Her mind raced with possibilities. Maybe someone from the village would come looking for her. Maybe a traveler would pass by. She needed to be ready to call out, to signal for help if the chance came. Despite the fear and pain, Ahioka also felt a sense of awe. She could see the stars beginning to appear above the canyon, shining brightly in the clear sky. The moon cast a silver light across the rocks, creating shadows that danced and shifted. She realized that even in the darkest moments, there was beauty around her. It gave her hope. She whispered a quiet promise to herself. She would survive, she would not give up, and she would find her way back home. As the night deepened, Ahioka listened carefully. The canyon was full of sounds, rustling leaves, the distant flow of the river, the occasional cry of a nocturnal bird. She strained her ears, hoping to hear human voices, any sign of rescue. But the canyon was vast, and no one was near. Still, she refused to panic. She focused on her breathing, on keeping her body calm, and on thinking clearly about her next steps. Every hour that passed, she learned more about patience, endurance, and the strength that comes from within. By midnight, exhaustion weighed heavily on her. Her muscles ached, her ankle throbbed, and her eyelids felt heavy. But she did not allow herself to sleep deeply, knowing she needed to remain alert in case someone approached. She rested her head against the rock and drifted in and out of consciousness, dreaming of her village, of her family, and of the wide canyon that both trapped and inspired her. In those dreams, she walked freely along the cliffs, feeling the wind on her face and the sun on her back, reminding herself that she was capable and brave. When the first hint of dawn touched the canyon, Ahioka opened her eyes. Her ankle was stiff, but her spirit was stronger than ever. She had survived the night, and now a new day brought new hope. She resolved to stay alert, to continue looking for ways to signal for help, and to never lose faith in her ability to survive. She whispered quietly, almost to herself, "I can do this. I will get out." The canyon, silent and vast, seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for what would come next. Ahioka's journey had only begun, and though the danger was far from over, she felt a sense of courage she had never known before. The narrow crevice that had trapped her was no longer just a prison. It was a place of challenge, a test of strength, patience, and determination. And Ahioka was ready to face it. The morning air in the canyon was crisp, carrying the scent of dry earth and sun-warmed rocks. Ahioka had spent the first hours of daylight carefully testing her ankle, shifting slightly to see if she could inch toward a safer position. Her muscles ached, and her ankle throbbed with every tiny movement. But she forced herself to remain calm. She knew that panic would not help her, and she repeated the lessons her elders had taught her. Think clearly, act carefully, and wait for opportunity. She had survived one night trapped in the crevice, and now, in the light of day, she felt a flicker of hope. Meanwhile, a lone cowboy rode his horse along a narrow trail farther up the canyon. His name was Jed, a man in his 30s with a weathered face and eyes that had seen more hardship than most. He traveled often, moving slowly between settlements and scouting the land for ranchers in need of help. Jed had grown up in the frontier, learning to read the terrain, track animals, and survive in harsh landscapes. The canyon was familiar to him, but he had never ventured this far from the main trail. Today, though, he was following a faint scent of fresh water to check on a small herd of cattle grazing in the valley below. As Jed guided his horse along the rocky path, he heard a faint sound, almost swallowed by the wind. At first, he thought it was the echo of a bird or the rustling of leaves, but then it came again, a weak, desperate call.
Hello!
Help! The voice was distant and trembling, almost lost in the vast canyon. Jed's instincts kicked in immediately. He knew that sound meant trouble, and he slowed his horse to listen more carefully. He looked around, scanning the cliffs and ledges. The canyon was quiet, almost eerily so, but the faint echo persisted. Jed's experience told him two things. First, the voice was human. Second, whoever it was, they were in serious danger. He guided his horse cautiously down a small slope, moving toward where the sound seemed strongest. His eyes darted across the rocks, noting every shadow, every possible hiding place. The canyon was treacherous. A misstep could send him or his horse tumbling down the cliffs. But he pressed on, driven by the knowledge that someone's life might depend on him. Meanwhile, Ahioka had heard the faint sound of hoofbeats in the distance but was not sure if it was real or imagined. Her heart leapt when she realized that it could be someone coming to help her. She shouted again, using every bit of strength she had left. Help! Please! Over here! The sound bounced off the canyon walls and traveled further than before. She hoped it would reach the person who was approaching. Her voice grew hoarse, but she refused to stop. Jed finally spotted movement down below, near a narrow crevice between two rocks. At first he thought it might be an animal, but then he saw the figure of a young girl, her head bowed and her body pressed against the rock. He realized immediately that she was trapped. His horse shifted nervously beneath him, sensing the tension, and Jed dismounted carefully, tying the horse to a sturdy bush nearby. He approached the crevice slowly, keeping his weight balanced on the uneven ground. He did not want to startle the girl or cause rocks to shift. When Ahioka saw him approaching, she froze for a moment, unsure whether to trust this stranger. She had grown up hearing stories of settlers and cowboys, some friendly, some dangerous. She pressed herself back against the rock, keeping her voice firm but cautious. "Make it quick, cowboy. I won't scream," she said, her voice trembling but brave. She did not know if he would be patient or reckless, and she had learned that courage often required a careful balance between fear and trust. Jed paused, recognizing the mixture of fear and bravery in her tone. He spoke softly, trying not to alarm her.
Easy there, little one. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm just here to help.
He assessed the situation, noticing the way her ankle was twisted and the way her body was wedged between the rocks. It would take careful planning to free her without causing more harm. Jed's experience in difficult terrain and dangerous situations had taught him patience, and he took a moment to consider the best way to approach the rescue. He knelt beside her, careful not to move any rocks yet. "Can you move at all?" he asked gently. Ahioka shook her head, biting back a cry of pain. Jed nodded, understanding that he would need to take every precaution. He scanned the area for tools or objects that could help. A sturdy branch lay nearby, and he picked it up, testing its strength. He also found a few loose stones that could serve as wedges or supports. Every move had to be deliberate. One wrong step could crush her or worsen her ankle injury. Ahioka watched him closely, noticing the careful way he moved. She realized that his intentions were good, but she remained wary. "Don't break anything else," she warned quietly. Jed smiled faintly, appreciating her humor despite the danger. "I'll be as gentle as I can," he promised. He knew that gaining her trust was as important as the physical act of freeing her. The girl's courage and resilience were clear, and he respected her deeply. Jed worked slowly, testing each rock and ensuring the ground beneath him was stable. He instructed Ahioka to move slightly to reduce pressure on her ankle while he positioned the branch to lift a larger stone pinning her leg. She obeyed carefully, wincing but willing to cooperate. Step by step, they began the delicate process of freeing her. The canyon echoed with the sound of shifting stones and the occasional grunt of effort from Jed. It was slow work, but speed could be dangerous. and both of them knew it. As they worked, Jed and Ahioka began to communicate more. She told him about how she had explored the canyon that morning, how the rocks had betrayed her, and how she had spent the night trapped. He listened, admiring her resilience and calm in the face of fear. He shared a little about his life, about traveling between settlements and helping those in need. The conversation, though brief and cautious, created a small bond between them, a fragile trust forged in danger. The sun climbed higher, and the heat began to press down on them, making the work more exhausting. Sweat ran down Jed's forehead as he lifted and moved rocks, but he did not stop. Ahioka gritted her teeth, holding steady as he worked. Each movement had to be precise. The large stone above her ankle shifted slightly, and her heart raced with a mix of fear and hope. Jed paused, assessing the new position, and adjusted his approach. Finally, after what felt like hours, he managed to wedge the stone in place so that Ahioka could slowly pull her leg free. When her ankle finally emerged from under the rock, Ahioka let out a sigh of relief, tears welling in her eyes. She had been trapped for so long, unsure if anyone would come, and now she was free. Jed helped her sit up, supporting her carefully so she would not fall. They both took a moment to catch their breath, the tension of the rescue slowly releasing. Ahioka looked at him with gratitude and a hint of awe. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. Jed nodded, knowing words were not enough but glad to see her alive and safe. Once she was stable, Jed helped her move to a slightly safer area, where she could rest and assess her injuries. He offered her water and small pieces of bread he carried, making sure she ate and drank slowly. Ahioka accepted, her hands shaking slightly from the ordeal. The canyon was quiet again, but now it felt less threatening. With Jed by her side, she felt a sense of security she had not known since the moment she had fallen. As they rested, Jed explained that he would stay with her until she could be safely returned to her village. Ahioka, still wary but trusting, agreed. She leaned against the rock, trying to stretch her legs gently while Jed kept a watchful eye on the surrounding canyon. The bond between them, born of necessity and bravery, grew stronger with each passing moment. They shared quiet stories about their lives, their fears, and the places they had been, creating a sense of connection that neither expected. The day wore on, and the sun began to lower in the sky. The canyon, which had seemed so dangerous and isolating that morning, now felt like a place where courage and trust could overcome fear. Ahioka's ankle throbbed, but she felt stronger because someone had come when she needed help the most. Jed, for his part, was reminded of the importance of patience, careful thinking, and the quiet strength of those who face danger with bravery. By the time the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the canyon walls, Ahioka and Jed had established a plan for moving her safely back toward the trail that led to her village. It would be slow and careful work, but it was possible. Ahioka had survived the night trapped, and now, with Jed's help, she would survive the journey back. The canyon had tested them both, but it had also shown them that courage, trust, and determination could overcome even the most difficult challenges. The late afternoon sun slanted across the canyon walls, casting long shadows that twisted and stretched over the rocks. Ahioka's ankle throbbed, a sharp reminder of her fall, but she tried to move carefully, testing its strength as Jed helped her. The cowboy had been patient and methodical in freeing her from the tight crevice, but now came the next challenge, getting her safely out of the canyon. The terrain was uneven with jagged rocks and steep drops, and every step could be dangerous. Both of them knew that one wrong move could turn relief into disaster. Jed examined the path ahead. The trail to the canyon's edge was narrow, littered with loose stones and steep slopes. He knew that he could not simply lift Ahioka and carry her. The risk of slipping was too high. Instead, he decided on a careful step-by-step approach, guiding her with ropes he had tied to his horse and to sturdy rocks along the path. "We'll go slowly," he said. "No rushing, no sudden moves. We take it one step at a time, all right?" Ahioka nodded, gripping the rope tightly and trusting his guidance, even though she had never met him before. The first few steps were agonizingly slow. Ahioka's ankle protested every movement, and the rocks beneath them threatened to shift with the smallest pressure. Jed stayed close, offering steady hands and calm instructions. Shift your weight to your left, hold on to the rope. Good. Now slowly, slowly. Each instruction was precise, each movement deliberate. The canyon seemed to hold its breath as they progressed. Every sound, the creak of rope, the scrape of stone, amplified in the still air. Despite the danger, Ahioka found herself observing the canyon with a new perspective. From this angle she could see the river winding below, glittering like a ribbon of silver, and the cliffs rising sharply around them, jagged and imposing. The beauty of the landscape contrasted sharply with the danger it posed, and she realized that nature could be both breathtaking and merciless. Yet, as she followed Jed's careful guidance, she felt a growing confidence. Step by step she moved, relying on both her own strength and Jed's experience. A sudden loose stone shifted under her foot, sending a jolt of fear through her body. She cried out, but Jed's steady voice immediately reassured her.
Hold on, don't move too fast.
I've got you. His hand gripped hers, anchoring her as he tested the rock and shifted his weight to stabilize it. It was a tense moment, and both of them knew that one false move could result in a fall. Ahioka's heart raced, but she forced herself to focus on Jed's instructions, letting go of panic and concentrating on careful, deliberate movements. As they continued, Jed noticed that Ahioka was tiring. Her small frame had endured a long night trapped, and now her muscles were straining against the effort. He suggested brief rests at safe spots along the way, where she could sit and stretch her legs. Each pause was a chance to breathe, to drink water, and to gather strength for the next section. During these rests, they spoke quietly, sharing stories to keep their spirits up. Ahioka told Jed about her village and family, about her love for exploring the canyon, and about the lessons she had learned from her elders. Jed shared tales of his travels, the ranches he had worked on, and the many times he had helped people in danger. The canyon grew narrower as they moved higher. Jagged rocks formed natural barriers, and in some places they had to squeeze through tight passages. Jed guided Ahioka carefully, supporting her with his hands and helping her shift her weight. Lean a little to the right, now push gently with your hands. Perfect, he instructed. Ahioka's trust in him deepened with every step. She realized that his calm, steady presence was the key to her survival. The danger was still very real, but with Jed's guidance it felt manageable. A sudden screech echoed from a cliff above, a bird startled by their movement, and both of them flinched. Ahioka's heart pounded, but Jed reminded her to stay calm. That's okay, he said softly. Nature has its sounds. Focus on the rope, on your steps. We'll be fine. His voice was steady, unwavering, and it reminded Ahioka that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. Step by step they advanced, moving closer to safety. Hours passed as they navigated the canyon. The sun began to sink lower, and the shadows stretched longer across the rocks.
Ahioka's strength was waning, but she refused to give up.
Jed noticed her fatigue and encouraged her gently. You're doing great. Just a few more steps and we'll find a safe place to rest for the night. She nodded, her teeth clenched against the pain in her ankle and legs. Every movement was a struggle, but the thought of reaching safety kept her moving. At one particularly narrow passage, a sudden shift of loose gravel sent a small cascade tumbling down the slope. Jed reacted instantly, bracing himself and helping Ahioka maintain her balance. Her heart leapt in terror, but his steady hands prevented a fall. Careful, careful, he murmured. She felt the warmth of his support, both physical and moral, and realized that teamwork was essential in moments like this. Alone, she would have been helpless. Together, they could overcome the canyon's obstacles. They reached a small ledge halfway up the canyon where they could rest safely. Ahioka sank to the ground, wincing as her ankle throbbed, and Jed offered her water and a small bite of bread. She accepted gratefully, her hands shaking from exhaustion. They sat in silence for a few moments, listening to the river below and the wind moving through the canyon. The tension slowly eased, replaced by a quiet sense of accomplishment. They had made it this far, and that was reason enough to hope. As they rested, Jed examined her ankle carefully. He did not have proper medical supplies, but he knew enough to stabilize it with strips of cloth and a gentle bandage. "It's going to be sore for a while, but this will keep it steady," he said. Ayoka nodded, appreciating his knowledge and calmness. She realized that she had been right to trust him, and a small smile broke through her fatigue. The canyon, which had seemed so dangerous and unyielding, now felt like a place where courage and careful action could lead to survival. Night began to fall, and the canyon cooled rapidly. Jed knew they could not continue in the dark. The risk of a fall was too high. He suggested setting up a temporary camp on the ledge. Using small stones and branches, they created a small sheltered area where Ayoka could rest more comfortably. Jed built a small fire nearby, careful to keep it controlled, to provide warmth and light. The flickering flames cast dancing shadows across the canyon walls, creating a sense of calm after the tense climb. While Ayoka rested, Jed kept watch, scanning the canyon for any signs of danger. He thought about the many times he had faced challenges alone, and how different it felt to share this moment with someone who depended on him. The bond between them, forged through shared danger, had grown stronger, and he felt a deep respect for the young girl's bravery and resilience. Even though she was small and young, she had endured a night trapped in the canyon and now had climbed a treacherous path with his help. The night deepened, and the stars emerged above the canyon, sparkling like diamonds in the clear sky. Ayoka looked up briefly, feeling a sense of wonder despite her exhaustion. She realized that she had survived what could have been a deadly accident, and that someone had come to her aid when she needed help most. The canyon was no longer just a place of danger, it had become a place of courage, teamwork, and trust. Jed spoke softly as he watched over her. "You did well today. You stayed calm, you listened, and you moved carefully. That's what kept you safe." Ayoka smiled faintly, feeling proud despite her pain. She had faced the canyon alone and survived, and now, with Jed's help, she had conquered its most dangerous sections. The experience had changed her, teaching her lessons about patience, courage, and trust that she would carry with her for the rest of her life. By the time the moon was high in the sky, Ayoka had rested enough to prepare for the final stretch of their journey. Jed checked the path ahead carefully, planning the safest route down the canyon toward the trail leading to her village. They would have to move slowly again, but with her ankle stabilized and both of them alert, the final steps were possible. The canyon had tested them both, but it had also revealed their strength, resilience, and the power of careful teamwork. As they prepared to move, Ayoka whispered quietly to herself, almost in awe. "I thought I would be alone forever, but I'm not. We'll get out of this." Jed nodded silently, offering her a reassuring smile. Together they would face the canyon's remaining challenges, determined to reach safety and survive the ordeal that had tested them so severely. The night in the canyon was quiet, but the shadows seemed deeper, stretching across the jagged rocks like dark fingers. Ayoka had rested as much as she could on the small ledge, her ankle still throbbing, but stabilized by Jed's careful bandaging. She felt a mixture of exhaustion and relief. She had survived the night trapped in the crevice, climbed the dangerous canyon with Jed's help, and had now rested enough to continue the journey. Her heart still raced with every sound in the canyon, the distant rustle of leaves, the whisper of the wind, but she no longer felt entirely alone. Jed's presence gave her courage, a steady anchor in the vast, intimidating landscape. Jed checked the rope they had used to steady Ayoka and adjusted it to ensure it would support her weight during the descent. "We have to be careful," he said gently. "The canyon isn't forgiving. One misstep and we could both get hurt." Ayoka nodded, gripping the rope tightly. She had learned the importance of patience and caution during the climb, and now every movement mattered even more. Together they planned their path carefully, noting the safest footholds and the points where the rope would provide extra support. The first steps were slow and deliberate. Ayoka leaned heavily on the rope, placing each foot carefully, while Jed moved just behind her, guiding her and keeping watch. The canyon walls rose sharply above them, casting long shadows in the moonlight, and the path below dropped steeply into darkness. Every rock seemed to hold a hidden danger, and the wind carried whispers that reminded them of the canyon's vastness. But the duo pressed on, their determination stronger than fear. As they descended further, Ahioka's muscles screamed with fatigue. Her ankle throbbed painfully, and her legs felt weak from the climb and the hours spent trapped. She tried to steady her breathing, taking small, careful steps. Jed encouraged her, his voice calm and steady. "You're doing great. Just a little further. One step at a time. Don't rush." Each word was a lifeline, grounding her in the moment and giving her strength to move forward. At one particularly steep section, the canyon walls narrowed sharply, forcing Ahioka to squeeze through a tight gap while maintaining her balance on the uneven rocks. A small loose stone shifted beneath her foot, and her heart jumped in terror. Jed's hand shot out instantly, gripping her arm and steadying her. "Careful, don't panic," he said firmly. She focused on his voice and the steady grip of his hand, trusting him completely. Slowly, carefully, she moved through the narrow passage, each step a victory against fear and exhaustion. Hours seemed to pass as they continued down the canyon. The moonlight shifted, illuminating the rocks in a ghostly silver glow. Ahioka began to notice small details she had missed before. The way the wind whispered through the canyon walls, the faint glimmer of the river far below, the stars shining brilliantly above. Even in the midst of danger, the canyon had a strange beauty, a reminder that life could be both harsh and breathtaking. These thoughts gave her a renewed sense of determination. She would survive. She would make it back to her village. Jed noticed her growing fatigue and suggested another brief rest. They found a small flat area where Ahioka could sit safely, away from loose rocks and sharp edges. He encouraged her to drink water and eat a little, even though her stomach felt empty. She nibbled on the bread he offered, savoring each bite, grateful for the simple nourishment. During the break, they spoke quietly, sharing thoughts and feelings to distract themselves from the tension. Ahioka told Jed about her family and village, about the elders who had taught her survival skills, and about her dreams of exploring the canyon further. Jed shared stories of the people he had met and the challenges he had faced in his travels, always emphasizing the lessons he had learned about patience, caution, and courage. As they resumed their descent, the canyon grew even steeper. The rocks were jagged and loose in places, forcing them to move with extreme care. Jed guided Ahioka, supporting her weight whenever necessary and ensuring that the rope remained secure. Each step required concentration and trust. Ahioka found herself relying not just on her own strength, but on Jed's experience and calm presence. She realized that courage was not just a personal trait. It was also about trust, teamwork, and the willingness to lean on others when needed. At one point, Ahioka's foot slipped slightly on a patch of gravel. She gasped in fear, but Jed's quick reflexes prevented a fall. His strong hand gripped her arm, holding her steady. "That's okay," he said gently. "Just breathe. Focus on the next step." Her fear subsided slightly as she realized that they were a team, working together to navigate the canyon's dangers. Every obstacle they overcame strengthened both her body and her spirit. As the sun began to rise, casting soft golden light across the canyon, they finally reached a wider, more stable path. The terrain was less treacherous here, and Ahioka could move more freely, though her ankles still throbbed with pain. She leaned on Jed for support, taking slow, careful steps. Each movement brought them closer to safety, closer to the village, and closer to the warmth and comfort of home. The sense of relief grew stronger with every step, mingling with the exhaustion and pain she still felt. When they reached the edge of the canyon, the sight of the open land and familiar landscape filled Ahioka with joy. The village lay not far away, and she could see the first signs of people moving about in the early morning light. Her heart swelled with relief and gratitude. She had survived the night trapped, climbed the canyon with determination, and now stood on the brink of safety. Jed smiled at her, his eyes reflecting pride and respect. "We're almost there," he said. "Just a little further." The final steps into the open were slow but steady. Ahioka's legs trembled from fatigue, but she refused to give up. With Jed's support, she carefully walked toward the village, each step a testament to her courage and resilience. When they finally reached the edge of the settlement, villagers began to notice them. People rushed forward, concern etched on their faces as they saw the young girl supported by a cowboy. Ahioka's parents ran toward her, calling her name, tears streaming down their faces. Relief and joy filled the air as they embraced her, checking her over to ensure she was not seriously injured. Jed stepped back, letting the family take over. Ahioka's mother and father expressed their deep gratitude, bowing slightly in respect to the cowboy who had saved their daughter. Ahioka smiled weakly, exhausted but happy to be safe. She realized that the canyon, which had seemed so dangerous and unforgiving, had also taught her invaluable lessons about courage, trust, and the kindness of strangers. Jed had risked himself to save her, and in doing so, he had shown that bravery was not just about physical strength. It was also about compassion and careful judgment. In the following days, Ahioka's ankle slowly healed with rest and the care of her family. She spent time reflecting on the ordeal, thinking about the night trapped in the crevice, the climb through the canyon, and the moments of fear and hope she had experienced. She realized how much she had grown in those hours, how fear had become courage, isolation had become trust, and danger had become a lesson in resilience. Jed remained in the village for a short while, helping the family move through the canyon safely and sharing more of his knowledge about survival in the land. His calm presence continued to reassure her, reinforcing the bond that had formed during their shared ordeal. The village began to talk about the rescue, spreading the story of Ahioka's bravery and Jed's heroism. People marveled at how the young girl had survived a night trapped in the canyon, and how the cowboy had come to her aid. The tale became a reminder to everyone that courage, determination, and trust could overcome even the most dangerous challenges. Ahioka herself carried the lessons she had learned, understanding that fear was natural, but perseverance and careful thinking could lead to survival and growth. As time passed, Ahioka continued to explore the canyon, but with a new respect for its dangers and mysteries. She moved with caution, always remembering the night she had been trapped and the cowboy who had saved her life. The canyon, once a place of fear, became a symbol of resilience, adventure, and the lessons learned through hardship. Jed eventually continued his travels, leaving behind a deep impression on the village and on Ahioka. They had shared a rare experience that neither would forget: the power of bravery, trust, and compassion in the face of danger. Even years later, Ahioka would think back to that moment in the canyon, to the sound of the rocks shifting under her weight, the sharp pain of her ankle, and the voice of the cowboy guiding her. She remembered how fear had turned into courage, how isolation had turned into trust, and how the night of uncertainty had led to survival and growth. The canyon remained a vast and beautiful place, but also a reminder of the strength of the human spirit and the bonds formed in moments of true danger. By the time the sun set on the canyon once more, Ahioka stood on a ledge she had once feared, gazing at the river below. She thought of the cowboy who had saved her, of the lessons she had learned, and of the courage that had carried her through the night. The canyon had tested her in every way, but she had survived. And in surviving, she had discovered a strength she never knew she had, a quiet, steadfast courage that would guide her through all the challenges yet to come.